The office always smelled the same at 6:45 a.m. Burnt coffee from the night pot, faint ozone from the copy machines, and that cold recycled air, the vents kicked out before the heat came on. I liked it that way. 20 years, not a single sick day, and I was always the first one in. I'd walk the hallway alone, mug in hand, lights humming overhead, and by the time anyone else showed up, I'd already have the day lined out like a map. No surprises, no excuses. That morning should have been no different. But when I swiped my keycard, the reader blinked red. I tried again. Same red flash. No click. Just the soft whir of the HVAC and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights beyond the glass. I stood there for a second, card in my hand, staring at my own reflection in the tinted door. Behind me, the parking lot was still half dark, and the only sound was the low rumble of a distant delivery truck. Then I heard heels on tile. Slow, deliberate. I didn't need to turn to know it was someone from HR, the kind of gate that came with a clipboard in hand. "Morning," she said, tone as neutral as hospital paint. When I did look, her face was wearing something that wasn't quite a smile. "We're going with someone more flexible." It took me a second to register the words. Flexible? She didn't wait for me to respond. She gestured through the glass into the bullpen, where a young woman sat at my desk, or what had been my desk. Pajama pants, messy bun, oat milk latte balanced on one knee, tapping lazily at a keyboard like she was messaging a friend instead of working. "This is Jill," HR said. "She's starting today. She'll be working remotely most of the time, but she wanted to get a feel for the space." I watched Jill laugh at something on her phone. "By the way," she called over to HR, "can I start at 11? I'm not really a morning person." HR nodded indulgently. "Of course." I didn't say anything. Not to Jill, not to HR. I just slid my keycard into my pocket and kept my expression flat. No anger, no scene. That's not how I operate. My name is Michael Rourke. I'm 52 years old. Until about 30 seconds before, I'd been Senior Logistics Security Coordinator for Ironvale Systems, a position I'd held for 2 decades. The title sounds harmless. Some middle management slot in a company that moves steel, parts, and heavy equipment across the country. But what the HR file doesn't say is that my real job was keeping Ironvale's shipments from being compromised. By thieves, by competitors, by people who'd sell our routing data to the highest bidder. I earned that job, the same way I earned every other post in my career. Quietly. Before Ironvale, I spent a long time in government service, mostly in places where you learned to read a room in under 3 seconds, or you didn't come back. My work didn't make headlines, and that was the point. The more invisible you are, the more effective you become. HR was still talking, something about severance packages and transitional support. I wasn't listening. I was watching Jill adjust herself in my chair, spinning it a little, sipping her latte, and looking at her phone again. Something in me shifted then, a soundless, almost mechanical click. It was the same one I'd felt years ago, sitting in the back of an unmarked van in a foreign city, watching a man walk out of a building who wasn't supposed to be there. It's the moment you stop asking why and start calculating how. I nodded once, said, understood, and turned for the exit. My footsteps sounded steady in the empty corridor. HR said my name twice, maybe 3 times, but I didn't look back. I pushed open the glass door, stepped into the cold morning air, and let it shut behind me. Out in the parking lot, the world was just waking up. Streetlights clicked off one by one. Somewhere, a car radio bled out the end of a pop song. I unlocked my truck, slid behind the wheel, and sat there for a moment, with my hands resting on the steering wheel. 20 years without a sick day, without a missed delivery, without a single breach on my watch. And this was how it ended. Not with thanks, not even with a warning, but with a locked door and a stranger in pajama pants asking if she could start work after brunch. I started the engine, but I didn't drive away. Not yet. My eyes went to the mirrored glass of the office facade. From this angle, I could see Jill through the second-floor window, already leaning back in the chair, laughing at something on her screen. She wasn't looking at the shipment schedule. She wasn't reviewing security protocols. She had no idea what that desk really meant. The HR director passed behind her, glancing once out the window toward my truck. I kept my face still, my eyes on the building. I wanted her to see that I hadn't left. Not really, because I hadn't. I pulled out of the lot slowly, the kind of slow that doesn't draw attention, but gives you time to think. 13 days. That was the number that floated into my head before I hit the first intersection. Not 2 weeks, not 10 days, 13. Enough time for a new hire to show her hand. Enough time for someone to make the kind of mistake you can't walk back. The countdown had started, and this time I wouldn't be swiping a key card to get inside. 13 days. That's how long I stayed silent. No calls to old contacts, no notes left in mail slots, no hint to anyone that I was still circling the perimeter. Every morning I parked the same dented silver sedan across from Iron Vale's main building, angled just enough that my side mirror caught the lobby doors. From the outside, I was just another guy killing time between errands. Inside, my eyes were mapping patterns. The first thing you notice after a dismissal is how quickly your absence disappears. By day 2, nobody glanced toward my old parking spot. By day 5, the security guard at the front desk stopped looking out the window entirely. People walked in and out without the faintest sense they'd been exposed. The company I'd kept watertight for 2 decades now floated with open seams, and they didn't even hear the water coming in. The new hire, Jill, didn't keep regular hours. Some mornings she drifted in around 10, phone in hand, oat milk latte in the other. Other days she came after lunch, hair damp from a shower, earbuds in. I'd catch her through the glass, laughing at whatever was on her screen, oblivious to the shipments moving on the docks or the trucks loading under the south awning. She had no idea those schedules were the arteries of the company. Cut them, and the whole organism bleeds. It wasn't just her hours. 2 nights in that first week, I saw her meet a courier in the alley behind the building. Not our regular contracted driver. This guy wore no uniform, no company badge, plain black jacket, beat-up motorcycle helmet. Each time, she took delivery of a slim padded envelope, signed nothing, and vanished inside. 15 minutes later, lights went off in the executive wing, and the building went dark. The executives had their own changes. I knew their habits like clockwork. Jensen took his calls in the South Conference Room. Mason liked pacing the terrace when the weather held, and Harris never missed his 3 p.m. walk to the vending machines. After Jill started, calls shifted behind closed doors. I saw lips moving through frosted glass, but couldn't make out faces. One afternoon, Mason stepped into the hall mid-call, spotted Jill coming around the corner, and hung up before she reached him. On the 10th day, a memory from years ago slipped in like an old scar, twinging before the rain. I was 32, newly rotated out of field operations, and trying to remember how to live somewhere that didn't smell like cordite or diesel. Iron Vale offered me a desk, a purpose, and just enough danger to keep me from going numb. I told myself this was the end game. Stable work, a steady paycheck, a clean cover that meant I could vanish without looking over my shoulder. I built my life inside those walls. Now I watched a woman who couldn't be bothered to wake up before 10, handle the keys I'd spent decades forging. By the 12th day, the irritation was gone. In its place was something colder. I'd stopped seeing her as the girl in pajama pants and started seeing her as a point of entry. One I hadn't secured, one now being used by someone else. The after-hours deliveries, the closed-door calls, the sudden shifts in executive behavior, they didn't feel like coincidence. They felt like staging. That afternoon, I shifted my mirror to catch the east loading bay. A black SUV pulled up, idled for 30 seconds, then drove off without anyone getting out. 10 minutes later, Jill appeared at the rear door with her coat collar up, glancing toward the street before heading back inside. She didn't see me parked under the shadow of the hardware store awning. I thought about how many hours I'd spent inside that building, pretending to be just another cog in the machine. The truth was, my role was never about spreadsheets or truck manifests. Iron Vale was a choke point in a much larger network, a place where competitors, thieves, and opportunists could be stopped before their reach extended into industries they had no business touching. My desk wasn't just a desk. It was a listening post. Every shipment we tracked was an early warning. Every delay, a potential breach. Now the post was unmanned, or worse, manned by someone who didn't know, or didn't care, what signals they were letting through. That thought carried weight, heavier than the personal insult of being locked out. If the wrong hands pulled the wrong data from Iron Vale's systems, it wouldn't just be the company on the line. The ripple could hit ports, manufacturers, even federal contracts. I'd been telling myself that my time there was over, that I could walk away clean. But sitting in that sedan, watching Jill scroll through her phone with her feet on my old desk, I knew that wasn't the truth. You don't leave a post vulnerable and call it done. You patch the hole, or you watch the ship sink. When the lobby emptied just before dusk, I started the car and drove the long block around to the west side. The service entrance was still unguarded. Budget cuts had stripped night security to a skeleton crew years ago. I noted the maintenance schedule taped to the inside of the window, the badge reader still glowing faint green. I wouldn't be swiping a card to get in, but there were other ways. I pulled away without slowing. No brake lights, no second look. I didn't need to go through the front door to be inside. Tomorrow, I'd start walking the perimeter from the other side of the glass. This wasn't about a job anymore. It was about securing the post I'd never truly left. The storage room hadn't changed in years. Same dust on the shelves, same half-busted chair in the corner, same faint smell of cardboard and printer toner that never quite faded. Most people thought of it as a graveyard for outdated equipment. Monitors with burn-in, towers missing side panels, cables knotted together in boxes no one would ever sort. But I knew better. Against the far wall sat a black terminal with a dead label, tagged non-functional, in faded red marker. I'd put that tag there myself 8 years ago after rerouting its network access through an unlisted substation. It was invisible to IT's active inventory and invisible to anyone scanning for live devices. To me, it was a back door that never stopped working. I powered it on, listening to the hum of old fans struggling to wake. The login screen flickered, waiting for credentials that didn't exist in any current directory. I still knew the sequence. 2 numbers, 1 word, 2 more numbers. The keys felt the same under my fingers, like muscle memory stored in the joints. The system accepted it without hesitation. The first thing I checked was the internal feed. Every camera in the building, lobby, offices, loading bays, even the break room, rolled across my screen in neat, tiled squares. I watched Jill through the fisheye lens above my old desk, bare feet on the wood, chair reclined almost horizontal, giggling into her AirPods like she was in the middle of a brunch call with friends. The company-issued laptop balanced on her lap displayed lines of code I recognized instantly. Not our software, not even our security sandbox. This was an encrypted interface for a data broker exchange. I'd seen it before, years ago, on a seized drive during a corporate raid in Atlanta. Whoever she was working with had reach, and they were paying her to feed it. I shifted to her screen capture. The keystrokes were quick, deliberate. Files accessed from our restricted client directory, copied into a compressed packet, renamed with a decoy extension. She wasn't careless. She knew exactly what she was taking and how to hide it. I let the footage run while I built out the next layer. In the building's smart system, maintenance logs ran on a separate circuit from operational data. That made them perfect cover. I planted a series of silent alerts in the HVAC status reports, mic-level audio pickups disguised as temperature sensor diagnostics, motion triggers set inside ventilation shafts, all routed through the terminal I was sitting at. If someone so much as breathed near a vent, I'd know. The longer I worked, the more my pulse settled into the old rhythm. This was the kind of thing I'd done for half my career. Set the net, step back, and wait. And for a moment, I almost ended it there. I could walk away now, hand the logs over to someone in law enforcement, let them make the case. After all, it wasn't my post anymore. My name wasn't on the payroll, my ID didn't work, and no one had asked me to clean this up. But then I saw it. Jill leaning forward, voice dropping, lips moving in a way I'd learned to read without sound. She was reading off client names. Big ones. Contracts worth tens of millions, some with federal oversight. And in my head, I saw another room, another time. Years back in a desert outpost, watching a feed just like this one. We'd flagged a low-level asset for irregular comms. My teammate Laird had been on point. He'd raised concerns, but the desk commander waved it off, said it wasn't our fight. 2 weeks later, Laird was dead, 3 more with him, and the breach traced back to that same asset. We'd looked the other way. I closed my eyes and let that memory burn itself clear. Then I opened them and started pulling everything. Key logs, file hashes, timestamps, network pings. I traced her connection outward, watching it bounce through 3 proxy nodes before hitting a server block I knew belonged to a shell company in Buenos Aires. That was another flag. Argentina was a known staging ground for the broker network I'd seen in Atlanta. By the time I was done, the system was layered with traps. Anytime Jill accessed those directories again, the smart system would mark the event with an invisible ping and send me a silent alert. If she moved data off-site, I'd know the exact second and where it landed. And when that happened, I'd be ready to intercept. Not after the fact, but in the moment, with proof and with the trail still warm. I sat back in the broken chair, watching her one last time. She'd shifted positions, legs now curled under her, sipping from a mug she hadn't touched in an hour. On her screen, the transfer bar hit 100%, and she closed the window without so much as a glance over her shoulder. I didn't feel anger. Anger clouds your hands. What I felt was resolve, the quiet, unshakable kind that comes when you know exactly what needs to happen and exactly how you're going to do it. She thought she was working unnoticed. She thought no one was left who understood the system well enough to see her. She was wrong. Now it was just a matter of timing, and I've always been patient. The alert hit my watch at 2:07 a.m., motion trigger from the West Service exit. I switched to the live feed, and there she was, slipping out into the alley with a gray backpack, slung low across her shoulders. No coffee, no phone, no casual sway in her step. This was business. The night was wet from a slow, steady rain that left the asphalt slick under the amber glow of the security light. She didn't look back. A black SUV idled 20 feet from the door. No plates, tinted windows. The driver never moved, just kept his gaze forward. She opened the back door, slid inside for less than 10 seconds, and emerged lighter. The pack's weight gone. In her right hand, she clutched a small silver hard drive, wrapped once in plastic. The man who took it was in his mid-40s, stocky, haircut close, the kind of build you get from years of staying strong without chasing vanity muscles. His face stirred something in my memory, and then it clicked. Caracas, 2011. A fixer who specialized in corporate extractions, buyouts by force, hostile takeovers with muscle to match the money. Last I'd heard, he'd been working for a raiding outfit out of Eastern Europe. I left the car 2 blocks back and followed on foot, moving through the alleys where the rain pooled in shallow mirrors. The sound carried differently at night, especially after rain. Tires hummed low, footsteps smothered by the wet. I kept to the walls, passing under the skeletal shadows of fire escapes, breathing through my nose, letting the rhythm settle. She handed him the drive without hesitation. No small talk, no second glance. His gloved hand closed over it, and he passed her a slim envelope in return. Payment. She tucked it into her jacket, then scanned the alley with a quick, practiced look. That told me she knew enough to be cautious, but not enough to see me. The driver leaned forward to shift the SUV into gear, and that's when I moved. I crossed the distance in 3 strides, hooked my forearm across his throat from the open driver's window, and pulled him back against the seat. He thrashed once, twice, but his leverage was bad, and my arm was locked under his jaw. The air left him in a choked grunt before his body went limp. I eased him sideways into the passenger seat, out cold, but breathing. The fixer spun at the movement, reaching inside his coat. My hand was already on his wrist before he cleared leather. I twisted hard, using his own forward momentum to drop him face first against the SUV's hood. His breath fogged the wet metal, and I kept him there, with a knee between his shoulder blades. The drive slid from his grip and skittered across the hood toward me. Jill froze. She took 1 step back, then another, before turning hard to run. She made it 5 paces before I caught her arm and pinned her against the brick wall. No shouting, no questions, just the truth, delivered cold. You've been feeding a raiding network with classified client intel. Contracts tied to federal oversight. That's espionage and corporate sabotage, and it's going to buy you 20 years minimum. She tried to twist free, but I wasn't holding her with muscle alone. I had her with the inevitability of what was coming. You think no one's watching, I said, leaning close enough for her to hear every word over the rain. But you've been on record since you touched the first file. Everything you've done tonight has been recorded. From the moment you stepped out that door to the second you handed him this drive. Her eyes flicked upward involuntarily. I didn't need her to see it, but I let her. 50 feet above us, almost invisible against the night sky, a drone hovered, rain sliding down its carbon shell, lens fixed squarely on her face. I'd planted it in the roof gutter 3 nights ago, just in case. You're finished, I said. The fixer groaned under the weight of my knee, trying to push himself up. I leaned harder, watching Jill's breathing quicken. She'd been smooth in the office, lazy in her posture, disarming with her laugh. Out here, stripped of the desk and the screen, she was just another asset caught in the open. I pulled a zip tie from my pocket and cinched her wrists together before she could think to resist. The sound of it locking was sharp in the wet air. She swore under her breath, voice trembling. I didn't respond. Words were wasted now. The fixer got the same treatment, hands behind his back, face still pressed to the hood. The driver wouldn't wake for another 15 minutes, maybe 20, enough time for the next part. I took the drive from the hood, slipped it into a sealed pouch in my coat, and signaled the drone to back off. Its motor whir faded into the night until the rain reclaimed the soundscape. "Who are you?" Jill asked finally, her voice small, edges fraying. "Someone you should have noticed," I said. We walked out of the alley toward the empty street, her steps uneven on the slick pavement. The SUV sat behind us with its cargo, 2 bound men, and the memory of a drop that didn't happen. Somewhere in the city, the people she worked for would be waiting for that drive, wondering why it hadn't arrived. They'd know soon enough that she wasn't coming back. The rain kept falling, steady, almost gentle. It washed the alley clean, but not the choices that had been made there. Those would stick. And now, they were mine to deliver. 2 days later, the rain hadn't stopped. It came down in thin, steady lines that blurred the world outside the diner's big front window. I sat in the corner booth, the one with a view straight across the street to Ironvale's main building. From here, the glass facade looked more like a mirror than a wall, reflecting the wet gray of the morning. Inside, high above the lobby, the boardroom lights glowed. I could see the faint silhouettes of people moving, security in dark suits, the executives seated around the long table, and the HR director sitting stiff as a mannequin. Jill wouldn't be there. She was already in federal custody, escorted off the property before sunrise the morning after the drop. I didn't need to hear the details to know the charges they'd stacked on her. Theft of corporate property, unauthorized transfer of classified information, possibly conspiracy, depending on how generous the prosecutors felt. The fixer she met in the alley was somewhere in the same system, maybe even in the same holding facility, wondering how a clean exchange had turned into a federal sting. The security team was talking now, pointing to folders and digital projections that glowed faintly against the boardroom glass. I couldn't hear them, but I could imagine the script. Breach identified, threat contained, damage assessment underway. An anonymous tip had provided the key evidence. The executives would nod, relieved, and someone would make a note about revising their hiring process. They'd congratulate each other on swift action, never realizing how close they'd come to losing more than a hard drive. I didn't plan on going inside. My name wouldn't be mentioned, my face wouldn't appear on the screens, and that was exactly how it should be. The work wasn't about recognition. It never had been. My coffee was cooling on the table, steam long gone. I took a slow sip anyway, letting the bitter taste ground me in the moment. Across the street, the boardroom door opened and a couple of suits stepped out. The HR director trailed behind them, pale and tight-lipped, the way people look when they've just been told they'll be answering questions for weeks. I thought back to the morning she blocked my door, the rehearsed expression, the calm delivery, the casual way she'd waved me off as if 20 years meant nothing. She had no idea who she was speaking to. They thought I was just an old man with a desk job, a relic who could be replaced with someone more flexible. What they forgot was that I built the locks they tried to change. I designed the systems they depended on without ever knowing it, and I could still walk through their walls whenever I chose. A waitress topped off my cup without asking. "You've been here a while," she said, her tone not unkind. I nodded, thanked her, and kept my eyes on the building. The boardroom lights dimmed. Whatever had been said in there was over now. The executives would go back to their schedules, the security team would compile their reports, and the HR director would start drafting statements for the press. just in case. By tomorrow, the whole thing would already feel like history to them. But for me, it was finished. The breach was closed, the network severed, and the company was secure again. They didn't need to know how it happened. They didn't need to know how close it came. They just needed to keep operating as if the danger had never been there. That was the point. If you do the job right, no one notices you've done it at all. I left some bills on the table, more than the coffee was worth, and slid out of the booth. The rain was colder now, finding the seams in my coat as soon as I stepped outside. The street between the diner and Iron Vale's building was slick and empty, the kind of emptiness that made sound carry. I didn't look back at the boardroom windows. I didn't need to. My boots found the crosswalk, each step measured and unhurried. No job waiting for me on the other side, no applause, no handshake. Just the knowledge that when it counted, I was there. That was enough. The city moved around me in its usual indifferent rhythm. Traffic lights changing, tires hissing over wet pavement, the low hum of a bus engine somewhere behind me. Some doors don't open for you anymore. That's fine. Sometimes, it's better to be the one holding the keys.